Hi, I'm Siobhan O'Neill. I'm the Mental Health Champion for Northern Ireland.
And I'm Koulla Yiasouma, and I'm the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People. When we talk about when mental health and wellbeing has become a priority for young people, I think recent years is not the term I would use. I think it's been a priority for probably nearly a decade. It's only now that we're beginning to see that coming into fruition with a change in culture, with more investment, with removing of the stigma. But children and young people have been telling us that their mental health and wellbeing, particularly as it relates to education, has been an issue for, I would say, for at least 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, the research evidence would demonstrate that there's been an increase in mental health problems in children and young people. You know, if you go back 20 years ago, the rates were certainly much lower, and there were studies that would have shown that. But we're also having a conversation about mental health now that we haven't had in the past. And that's very important too.
Yeah. Which shows progress, which actually shows that things are getting there. And but we've still got a way to go. So we're definitely in a better place than we were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But what has happened recently, the enormity of the situation that we're trying to address and resolve has become apparent.
And I think we've been in a global pandemic, and we've had services to children and schools even closed for various periods, and children not accessing their education and their services. And that has impacted on their mental health as well. So that's something that we're dealing with right now too.
Yeah, and we know, as you know, Siobhan, from work that we have done when we surveyed P7s and 16-year-olds and asked them how their mental health was during the pandemic, particularly the lockdowns, and that roughly 40% of P7s and over 50% of 16-year-olds said it had got worse. Now that's on top of the fact we knew there was an issue before the pandemic. So for have nearly half of our young people to say it has got worse during the pandemic just goes to show how important school is in their lives, not just for education, but to keep them safe emotionally and physically and in so many other ways. So that's been it's been really important, and we must do everything we can to avoid closing schools ever again.
Yeah, I think the conversation that we're having at the minute socially about mental health, particularly in Northern Ireland, it's really, really helpful. But I think we still need to have a smarter conversation around the difference between stress and mental illness and distress, and those coping skills, and how we build resilience and self-awareness in the children and young people. And I think that's the challenge now over the next few years.
And I think that's where your role is really critical, because you begin to unpick, because we've used the term mental health to be quite a catch-all. And we know that mental illness is actually, again, it's a thing, and there are types of mental illness and what have you. But we use and then I quite like the word emotional well-being. But I think what your role does, and what you do so well in that role, is begin to unpick what does it mean. And when we're talking about stress, doesn't mean we're talking about mental illness. What we're talking about is a young person, in our case, going through a difficult time, but that doesn't inevitably have to result in a mental illness. It's an emotional well-being issue, but I think that's what's really helpful about your role, beginning to unpick that, because I'm not always comfortable with the term mental health to mean so many things, and it's right to begin to look, because then how we address it and our approaches with young people are more relevant for them and for what they're experiencing, and you can target services and interventions or the conversation that best meets their needs. So I think that's been incredibly helpful since you've been doing this job in the last year or so.